Hello and welcome back to the Battle Room. My name is Colin and today I wanted to talk about the top 8 teams from the most recent regional championships in Liverpool, Germany. So I thought this was a pretty interesting tournament. Timing wise, it's a week after the US regionals, which I think is important to note going into this one. So we're not going to see too much meta development. Obviously, these players were preparing for the same regional as the same timing roughly, just a week different. So I think a lot of the changes we're going to see are mostly like really small ones, mainly with like optimizing teams and stuff of that nature. We're not seeing like a ton of crazy new adjustments and new Pokemon or new teams really, but I thought it'd still be important to talk about this tournament. It's pushing the meta forward a little bit, and I think it was a really cool tournament and a really cool finish. So without further ado, let's start with number 8, PENGY here. So PENGY's team is pretty standard. It's a classic Swordfish variant with Zapdos. I think Zapdos Kyogreization is really strong and really optimal and like a really good core. And then you round it out with 3 supports. So it makes a lot of sense. You have 2 maxes here. You have potentially Kyogre and potentially Zapdos. I think PENGY brought a pretty strong and consistent team. I don't think this team is very original at all, but it doesn't need to be. It's very effective at what it does, and it is really just about how well you can play. I think this format is more about how you're playing as opposed to how creative your team can get. I do think sometimes adding in a creative move choice or a mon can go a really long way, but I think reinventing the wheel and trying to find something absolutely new is not necessary a lot of the time, and I think PENGY proves it here. This is just a really strong, consistent team, and PENGY was able to perform extremely well at the tournament. So congrats to PENGY, and I think that team is still pretty solid. Clearly, it's still performing. It's still putting up numbers. This tournament was all X and 1 cut. PENGY went 7-1. Everyone had to only lose once, so that's pretty brutal for any tournament you're going to, especially one of this size and of this competitiveness. I think Europe's very competitive and very strong. Sometimes I'd argue Europe's better than NA, and so I think that that PENGY was able to come to Europe and top cut is pretty impressive. So next up we've got a Draco's team, which is a team consisting of Zacian, Groudon, Incin, Gastron, Charizard, and Grimmsnarl. Now this team is really strong. It's probably the best team in the format right now. If we're being completely honest, it's the best team in the format. It's really strong. I think I'll talk about it later. I'll save this one for later, but it's all about the pilot, and Draco piloted it really well. Yeah, congrats to them. It's a great cut. The team gives you the tools you need to succeed, and they piloted it expertly. Next up is Cameron Smith with Lunaludon. Lunaludon is not something we're seeing a lot of, to be honest, or at all. Honestly, I don't think I've seen a really good top tier Lunaludon in a minute. So it's cool to see Lunaludon perform here. Lunala Groudon is obviously the core. Venusaur also performing well. I think Venusaur has been kind of a pretty garbage tier Pokemon. Charizard has really stepped up as the best Sun abuser, and we're not really seeing much of Venusaur, so it's cool to see Venusaur here. I do think it has the great tools. It's just not performing, and the meta is really against it right now. But I think obviously Sleep Powder, Max Vinelash are really broken. And I think, I don't know if Venusaur is going to be here to stay, but I think teching it onto certain teams and maybe potentially striking certain matchups with Venusaur does sound really strong. And I do think Urshifu is really cool, and it's really hard to fit on teams though, but it does, when it's popping off, it does look really cool, and it looks really strong. Certain matchups like just struggle with Urshifu. I've played against Urshifu, and it's giving me lots of problems. Because it's definitely not as dominant as it once was in Series 9, but in this format, it's definitely a little bit harder to slaughter Urshifu in, and then Thundurus to round things out. It looks like a pretty solid, strong team. I'd be curious to see how it functions, because I do think Lunaludon is kind of interesting, especially if it has unique, cool game plans versus this classic Sun team, classic Ogre stuff. Like, it does seem really frustrating to have to deal with. So, for number 5, we have Taron Birdie. Pretty standard Swordfish team. This one has Whimsicott and Amoonguss instead of, we saw Grimmsnarl and Rillaboom and Incin in those slots, but this is a much more offensive version. There's no Intimidate, and it's just a go button, really. It's got a defensive core. Obviously, you can go back to Zacian, Kyogre, Zapdos, plus Amoonguss is a really defensive game plan, but you can also just hit the go button here with Amoonguss, Whimsicott, Kyogre, Whimsicott, Zacian, just go with Zapdos and like either Zapdosation and back or like Urshifuzation, and it seems like a really aggressive take on the team. So it's kind of an interesting one because it has a kind of duality, right? You can go really fast, really aggressive, but you also have like a pretty defensive core in nature. So it's a pretty cool team. I like it. It's a little bit different than a lot of the Kyogreization teams we're seeing, so it's a pretty cool team. I like it. Next up is Phillips team here with Yveldon plus Bronzong. So Yveldon has really not been seen, I would say, since Joe won that. He won like the first tournament of the season with Yveldon, but honestly, Yveldon hasn't really been touched outside of that I'm super well aware of. That's done really, really well, but it kind of popped off here, and it's really interesting to see the Bronzong. I know Joe did mention to me a while ago that Bronzong was one of the best parts, so it is really cool to see Bronzong pop back up, because I think Bronzong, especially versus the Pulky Ice Rider stuff, can be absolutely disgusting. So I think Bronzong's a really cool addition. I like the Venusaur once again showing up. 2 Venusaurs in the top 8 so far, which is not a mon I would have necessarily expected. But Venusaur's popping off here. Yveldon's doing well. I could see it being a pretty interesting call, because I think Yveltal doesn't match up perfectly in the mirror, but it does kind of give trouble to enemy Groudons. It can be really obnoxious if it starts snowballing. And like Yveltal plus Alecki can do wonders versus something like Charizard plus, Groudon Charizardization. So potentially an optimization for the mirror. And I kind of like the 6. I don't know how much I love Yveldon in reality, because Ice Rider is still really scary. We've got 3 Ice Weeks here, obviously, with Bronzong Instant, who are going to do really well. But I'm still a little bit afraid of Ice Rider. But I do like to see, kind of an interesting dynamic duo here. We have Lunaludon and Yveldon here that are doing well. 2, I think, restricteds that we haven't seen too much of and we haven't seen perform at a super insane high level yet. And it's refreshing to see. It's refreshing to see. But it looks like a really cool team. I like the Alecki. I like everything that's going on here. I think it'd be fun to see the movesets and such, but I think the 6 themselves do look pretty sick. Next up, we have ChefBen's team here. Chef's team was pretty crazy going into this tournament. This team is like basically pure hyper offense. So it's really interesting to see perform at a high level, because I would say traditionally hyper offense does pretty poorly, because you have to get all your turns right. You got to get the reads right, and it can be really hard, especially with switcheroo eject button, imprison Calyrex. A lot of this stuff is really crazy. Scarf Darmanitan. This is just pure hyper offense, and I think it's really cool to see it when it's piloted well. I think when it's piloted poorly, they just kind of crumble and you get kind of eaten alive by defensive teams. But when you're playing well and your team's on fire, these type of teams are unstoppable. This is nightmare fuel to play in tournament. These are like my worst nightmare teams to play. I hate playing against hyper offense. And yeah, Chef came with a tasty, spicy dish of hyper offense. I think for the most part, it makes a lot of sense. Whimsicott plus Calyrex Sensation are really, really strong, and they make a lot of sense together. Thundurus, Physical Thundurus, does pair well as with those 2 Pokemon as well. So it just becomes this like really good core of offensive pressure that's really hard to deal with. They're hitting you super effectively, they're hitting you neutrally, and you're just taking a lot of damage from Zacian and Calyrex Shadow Rider. There's not much to say about this team. It's super crazy, and it's really impressive that someone was able to pilot it to 3rd, because I think that like most of us, if we just showed up to a tournament with this team, we would just eat it. So, sure, congrats to that. Next up here is Thomas. This is the 2nd place team. So this was kind of a team, well, the idea was a team we've been seeing for a little bit, like I would say in the past month. Shedinja plus Kyogre has been popping up here and there. I saw it on several Japanese teams. It's been kind of popping off pretty well. Shedinja Kyogre is really interesting because a lot of them are running safety goggles at the moment. And it does end up checkmating a lot of Pokemon. Zacian can't touch Shedinja. Kyogre can't touch Shedinja. And, those are obviously 2 very popular Pokemon. Groudon has to use Rock Slide or Heat Crash. There's a lot of Pokemon that end up walling Shedinja if you play it correctly. I mean, Rillaboom if it doesn't have knockoff. So I think Shedinja is a cool, interesting checkmate Pokemon at the moment, and it's, I think, performing really, really well. I think it's a Pokemon that in the future you're going to have answers for if you're going to the European internets. But I think Shedinja is kind of nutty right now. Basically, I think the idea of the team is to do as much damage as possible, and then checkmate with Shedinja. Kartana helps accomplish that. We potentially have 2 maxes in Kartana or Ogre, or maybe Kartana Thundurus, depending on the type of Thundurus it is. I'm not really sure. But even if it's supportive, it helps everything shine. Instant to bring it all together, and Shedinja for the checkmate. I think Shedinja Kyogre is a really sick comp, and I'm kind of excited to see where Shedinja teams go, because the safety goggles one can be really difficult too for the Palkia Ice Rider teams. It basically walls like 6 of the restricted Pokemon. So, and it runs like really annoying sets like Endure, and also I think it runs Endure Ally Switch traditionally. I don't know if Hari ran it, but a lot of people run Endure so that it can actually still kind of have a Focus Sash and just waste a turn being on the field being obnoxious. So Shedinja is pretty sick. I think it's just kind of a dumb mod sometimes. Like, I think Shedinja is not actually that annoying. I think it is requires skill to be played, and I think it is cool when it does well. I personally am a Shedinja fan. And the winner, Eric Rios, 3rd in the world. Eric, congratulations for winning the tournament. Absolutely insane stuff. Eric's going to walk away with 200 CP and $2,000. Eric is a fantastic player, and they use the Sun team. This team is absolutely dominating. It won the last regional. It got top 8 in this tournament, as well as winning this one as well, and it got top 4 in the last one as well. So this team is just doing insane work. So far, this team has gotten 1st in 2 regionals, top 4 in Salt Lake City, and top 8 in this one as well. So 4 really solid finishes from this team. I think this team is the talk of the town right now. It's really, really good. It's really consistent. JoeUX9 equated it to Xerneas Groudon from 2016, which is a very dominant team. Personally, I don't know if I agree with that, but I definitely think it's the best team in the format. I don't think there's any arguing against it in the current state. I think it's absolutely insane. It puts on a ton of pressure with Zacian. Groudon empowers all of its teammates, and you just have so many good tools. You got Yawn, you got Fake Out, you got Double Screens, you got Airstream, you got Sun, you got Max Groudon, who can Steel Spike and Max Quake, so you're getting both boosts. You got Zacian. It has everything you could want in a team. Huge congrats to Eric, and it was well deserved. This team just is. I look at it as kind of an easel that the player can paint their game on, right? Like, it gives you so many options, it gives you so much control, and it is easily the best team in the format right now. So, I don't know. This team is really crazy. I think tomorrow I'm going to do a breakdown of the team. And hopefully have it posted by Wednesday, because I think this team is really important to talk about, because I think it is insanely broken. But I think the main thing is you just have so many tools. You Fake Out, I mentioned all those tools. I forgot about Instant, but Instant's there too with Fake Out, Parting Shot. It gives you just so many options and ways to outplay your opponents. And I think in a format like this, I think that's all that matters. And if you have your game plans locked up, you have your, if you have your matchups locked up, and you know how to play each matchup specifically, this team is amazing. It also gives you, you can get really creative in other matchups. You can find creative ways to solve problems if you're faced with, a Shedinja or faced with a Calyrex Darmanitan. You can find your way out of these situations that can, a good player can really shine with this team. We've seen it win twice. When will it stop winning? I don't know if it will win again, but I expect to see this team tons more times. I expect to see it cutting regionals. I expect to see it cutting events. It definitely is the strongest team in the format right now. And will it be contested? That's the question I think we're all wondering. Will this team be stopped? Huge congrats to Eric. But anyways, thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys have a great and amazing day. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I really would appreciate it. Have an amazing day, and I'll see you guys next time.